Welcome back to Culture Code English. I am so glad you are here today. Take a slow, deep breath, let your shoulders drop, get completely comfortable, and relax. Today, we are going to explore a deeply profound, invisible, and highly sacred hidden code of American life, the absolute obsession with property lines and the legal concept of personal boundaries. Imagine this. You are taking a peaceful walk through a beautiful American suburb. You see rolling green lawns, lovely flowers, and houses without any high stone walls. Everything looks completely open, harmonious, and free. But underneath that perfect green grass, there is a silent, invisible web of red lines. These are property lines. And in America, these lines are sacred. If you decide to build a wooden fence in your yard, you cannot simply guess where your land ends. You must hire a professional land surveyor. This specialist uses satellite data and metal detectors to find the exact, legal boundaries of your property, down to the very millimeter. Why is this necessary? Because if you build your fence even 1 inch over into your neighbor's yard, your neighbor has the absolute legal right to force you to tear it down. If a branch of your favorite oak tree hangs over the property line, your neighbor has the legal right to cut that branch off exactly at the boundary line. To many newcomers, this obsession with 1 inch of dirt feels cold, unfriendly, and selfish. You might think, we are neighbors, we are friends. Why are we arguing over an inch of grass? Why do we need strict, cold legal lines to separate us? But to understand the American mind, you must understand a deep, historical truth. In Western civilization, the physical boundary of your private property is actually a sacred shield designed to protect your freedom. This concept traces back over 400 years to a famous 1604 legal decision in England known as Semain's case. In that historic case, the court established a grand principle that became the foundation of modern liberty. The house of everyone is to him as his castle and fortress. This became a famous saying, "My house is my castle." It means that even if you are a poor peasant living in a fragile wooden cottage, your home is your kingdom. The wind may enter, the rain may enter, but the King of England cannot enter your home without your permission. The law drew a sacred, invisible boundary around your private property. For the first time in history, the absolute, unlimited power of the state was legally stopped at a citizen's door. So, when an American protects their property line today, they are not just protecting a piece of grass. They are practicing a 400-year-old tradition of personal sovereignty. They understand that a clear boundary is not a wall that divides neighbors. It is a sacred shield that keeps everyone safe, equal, and free under the law. Let us enter the first stage of our blueprint, understanding the connection between the physical fence and the psychological fence. There is a very famous, traditional American proverb that you will hear in many neighborhoods. Good fences make good neighbors. To many people who value collectivism and relational harmony, this proverb sounds cold and unfriendly. You might think, if we are good neighbors, why do we need a fence to separate us? Doesn't a fence mean we do not trust each other? But in American culture, the fence represents the exact opposite. A fence is not built out of hatred or suspicion. It is built out of deep respect. A fence clearly defines where my space ends and where your space begins. Because the boundary is clear, there is no confusion, no misunderstanding, and no conflict. I do not have to worry about your dog digging in my garden, and you do not have to worry about my children playing on your lawn. Because we respect each other's boundaries, we can maintain a peaceful, friendly relationship over many years. This physical appreciation for fences translates directly into an American's personal and psychological life. The first way you will notice this is through the concept of the personal bubble. When Americans stand and talk to each other in a hallway, at a store, or at a social event, they naturally stand about 2 to 3 feet apart. This is their invisible personal space bubble. If you stand too close, even if you are just trying to be friendly, an American will feel a sudden wave of physical discomfort. They will naturally take a small step backward to protect their bubble. They are not trying to be rude. They are simply protecting the invisible fence of their personal castle. The same rule applies to conversational boundaries. In America, there are very strict, unwritten laws about what you can and cannot ask in casual conversations. These are the psychological fences of the peach culture. You must never cross into these private zones without a deep, long-term relationship. For example, in many traditional cultures, asking someone about their salary, their age, or their marital status is seen as a normal way to show interest in their life. You might ask, "How much do you pay for your house?" Or, "Why are you not married yet?" But to an American, these questions are a direct, aggressive invasion of their private castle. They are crossing the property line of their mind. If you ask these questions, the friendly American smile will instantly freeze, and they will politely but firmly change the subject. When you learn to respect these invisible psychological fences, you realize they are not walls of rejection. They are simply the rules of engagement. By respecting their personal bubble and keeping your conversations in the safe, shared outer shell of the peach, you show Americans that you understand their cultural codes. You prove that you are a safe, civilized neighbor who knows how to maintain good fences so you can build good relationships. Let us enter the second stage of our journey, the profound contrast between contractual boundaries and relational boundaries. If you travel to many traditional relationship-based cultures, you will find a completely opposite way of living. In these societies, people value a concept called relational harmony. In these communities, boundaries are purposely kept soft, warm, and blurry. People live in tight, family-like groups. The golden rule is often, "We are all family. We do not need to build hard fences. We should share everything and not be so strict about individual property." In this warm, relational world, you might walk into your neighbor's kitchen without knocking. You might borrow a garden tool without asking, or eat from their table like it is your own. It creates a beautiful, cozy feeling of closeness and mutual support. But this soft, blurry boundary has a dark, invisible side. When a society does not draw clear, legal boundaries around the individual, it becomes very easy for the group, or for the powerful, to invade your private life. If there are no clear lines to protect your individual property, there are also no clear lines to protect your personal choices, your private time, or your fundamental rights. Without a hard boundary, relations can easily turn into emotional manipulation, and society often depends on the rule of man rather than the rule of law. If the boundary is not written in stone, whoever has the most power, the most money, or the highest status gets to decide where the line is drawn. But the Western concept of the sacred property line solves this problem. By using satellite data and land surveyors to draw a cold, white and black line on the soil, The law treats everyone equally. The billionaire and the poor worker have the exact same boundary protection. The government cannot step over that line, your boss cannot step over that line, and your neighbor cannot step over that line. The hard boundary makes you independent and secure. Let me tell you about David. David moved from a traditional, warm community in Asia to a quiet suburb in Ohio. In his home country, everyone in his neighborhood shared everything. Fences did not exist, and children ran freely from house to house. During his first month in Ohio, David decided to build a simple vegetable garden in his yard. He looked at the grass, guessed where his property ended, and started digging the soil. The next afternoon, his neighbor, a quiet American man, walked over with a professional paper map of the town's land registry. He pointed politely to a tiny metal stake buried in the grass. "Hi, David," the neighbor said with a calm but firm voice. "Your garden looks wonderful. But actually your tomato plants are about 3 inches over the property line onto my side of the lawn. According to our town maps, the boundary is right here." At first, David felt a wave of anger and disappointment. He thought, "This is so incredibly cold and selfish. We are neighbors. Why is he being so petty over 3 inches of dirt and some tomato plants?" But later, David discussed this with a local lawyer. The lawyer looked at David and explained, "David, in America, we do not protect the line because we are greedy. We protect the line because the line protects us. If you allow your neighbor to slowly claim 3 inches of your land without saying anything, after 20 years, that land legally becomes theirs. This is called adverse possession. If we do not respect the boundary in peace, we will eventually have to fight over it in anger. Clear lines prevent conflicts. They keep neighbors friendly." That conversation changed David's entire view of Western society. He realized that the cold, legal iron fence was actually a profound act of love and respect for peace. It allowed him to keep his Japanese or Chinese cultural warmth on his side of the line, while keeping his legal independence fully protected on the other. He understood that a healthy, mature society does not avoid boundaries. It honors them. Because clear boundaries are the only way to build lasting trust and true harmony. Let us enter the third stage of our blueprint, the law of the overhanging branch and the balance of peace. To many newcomers, these hard legal boundaries can still feel cold. You might think, if we live behind legal iron fences, doesn't it eventually turn a neighborhood into a collection of isolated prisons? How can we ever build a warm community if we are always measuring our yards with rulers? But in the American mind, the opposite is true. The hard boundary is actually the very thing that allows a warm, stress-free community to exist. The best way to understand this is through a very common daily life situation in American suburbs, the law of the overhanging tree branch. Imagine you are living in a quiet neighborhood. Your next-door neighbor has a massive, beautiful oak tree in their yard. But over several years, the branches of that tree grow long, crossing the property line and hanging directly over your private driveway. Every autumn, the tree drops sticky sap, wet leaves, and heavy acorns directly onto your newly washed car. In a relational culture with blurry boundaries, this situation can easily become an emotional nightmare. You might feel deeply annoyed, but you stay silent because you do not want to ruin the friendship. You suffer in silence and your resentment grows. Or you complain to your neighbor and they feel hurt and defensive. They say, "It is a natural tree. Why are you being so difficult?" a simple tree branch becomes a war of emotions, whispers, and anger. But American property law solves this emotional drama with a clear, objective boundary rule. According to the law in almost every state, you have the absolute legal right to trim any branches that hang over your property line. You do not need your neighbor's permission. You do not need to ask them to pay for it. The space above your yard belongs to you. But there are two strict boundaries to your right. First, you must cut the branches exactly at the property line. You cannot step over onto their grass or put your ladder in their yard to do the trimming. Second, you cannot cut the branches so deeply that you permanently damage or kill the tree. Because the legal boundary is clear, there is no emotional friction. Both neighbors know exactly where their rights begin and end. Let me tell you about Sophia. Sophia had recently bought her first home. Her neighbor, an older man named George, had a magnificent maple tree near the property line. Over the years, the massive branches had crossed the line, hanging right over Sophia's driveway, blocking the morning sunlight and dropping heavy leaves. In her home country, Sophia would have suffered in silence to avoid conflict, but she decided to follow the American code. She walked over to George, smiled, and said, "Hi, George. The branches of your beautiful maple tree are hanging over my driveway. I would like to hire a professional to trim them back exactly to the property line. I wanted to let you know first." George smiled warmly and nodded. "Thanks for letting me know, Sophia. According to the property line, those branches are in your space. You have every right to trim them. Go ahead." The next weekend, the tree trimmers arrived. They cut the branches exactly at the boundary line. George even walked out, waved to the workers, and helped Sophia sweep up the fallen leaves on the driveway. There was no anger. There was no resentment. There was no awkwardness. The boundary line had not built a wall of isolation between Sophia and George. It had preserved their friendship. Because the law gave them an objective, clear rule, they did not have to waste their emotional energy arguing. They could remain warm, friendly neighbors, because the invisible fence kept their boundaries clean, safe, and mutually respected. How can you use this knowledge to navigate the unique American obsession with boundaries? The secret is simple. Enjoy the friendship, but respect the fence. When you go about your week in America, try to see the big picture. When you see a wooden fence dividing two green lawns, or when a coworker politely steers a conversation away from their personal life, you are not looking at coldness or rejection. You are experiencing a 400-year-old tradition of liberty. You are watching how Americans protect their personal sovereignty, how they use clear physical lines to prevent daily conflicts, and how they honor the ancient legal promise that my house is my castle. When you learn to respect these boundaries, you realize they are not designed to keep you out. They are designed to keep everyone safe, equal, and free. By honoring your neighbor's property lines and respecting their personal bubble, you show them that you understand their social codes. You prove that you are a reliable, civilized neighbor who knows how to build clean, honest, and lasting relationships built on mutual respect. Look how far you have already come in this video. You have been listening to this real, natural, and deep English story for many minutes now. You did not have subtitles on, and yet you followed the narrative effortlessly. Your ears are naturally adapting to the speed, the intonation, and the flow of the language. You are doing an amazing job. Be patient with your brain. Language learning is not a sprint. It is like watching a beautiful oak tree grow. Every story you listen to, Every cultural blueprint you explore and every minute you spend here is quietly building your ear muscles and making you a stronger, more confident English thinker. Consistency is the ultimate key to success. You do not need to study for hours until you feel completely exhausted. Just 10 or 15 minutes of active, quiet listening every single day is enough to create extraordinary results over time. If you enjoyed discovering the secret history and codes of the American property line today, and if you are ready to make mindful listening a normal part of your daily English journey, I want you to make a simple, beautiful promise to yourself. Leave a small mark of your progress in the comments below right now. Type, "I am learning every day" in the comments. By writing these 5 words, you are telling your brain that you are growing. You are celebrating a small victory on your path to natural fluency. Thank you so much for spending this peaceful, meaningful time learning with me today on Culture Code English. Keep listening, keep practicing with patience, and never lose your curiosity. I look forward to exploring another beautiful piece of our world with you very soon. Have a wonderful, relaxing evening, and keep using English every single day.